Here's the story of 2020, a year for us to finally live in sync. So many things that need our understanding. It's time for us to think. It's the story of fellow humans who were busy with lives of their own, but they thought of bringing us together, and we can watch from home. We can all make this world much better. It's about what we're willing to confront. So sit back and enjoy the conversation of these rainbow warriors called the Queer Bunch.
The Queer Bunch, the Queer Bunch. It's a great day to watch the Queer Bunch.
Welcome to the premiere episode of The Queer Bunch. I'm super excited. I am your host or hostess, depending on my mood, Kero Saleib, your non-binary, queer Egyptian Canadian, and once in a while drag queen, and a flaming homosexual, and the Men Who Have Sex with Men outreach coordinator at the AIDS Committee of Durham region. I am super ecstatic to be bringing you this amazing show today, a show that is for and by and about the LGBTQ2+ community and the challenges we face. This show is all about community. Community is family, and family sometimes laughs together and discusses cheery, happy topics, and other times not so much. We do have uncomfortable conversations, and that's why we call it The Queer Bunch and community. But all this because family cares. Sometimes we will have a chuckle, sometimes we'll find together possible solutions, and sometimes it's just about bringing issues to the forefront. But we will always aim to find our common passions, goals, and desires, and we will always share our love. I may snatch my wig off once in a while and take the earrings off, but that's going to be on a different episode, I'm sure. You just never know. Now, I'm sure that you're tired of hearing about me and from me, and I'm ready to introduce to you guys our amazing co-hosts of the show that you will see every month with us. Are you guys ready to meet our co-hosts? Yes? Let's do this. Now first, let me introduce you to Viviana Santibañez. To me, she is already a legend. I look up to her and her non-apologetic fierceness. Hi, Viviana. Talk to me, girlfriend, and tell us what makes Viviana, Viviana.
Hey, Kero. It's so nice to be here with you guys. Folks here. Viviana Santibañez is a proud Latina trans heterosexual woman. You can refer to me as she and her. And so I guess something about me, it's you can either hate me or love me. Either way, I'm fine because I'm still gonna make you feel something. So that's gonna be Viviana here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Viviana. Let me tell you, viewers, I've worked with Viviana in the past. She is really unapologetic. You really do love her or hate her, but I love her from the bottom of my heart.
We love her.
Now, our next person is Ticha Albino. Ticha? Hi. She is our butch non-binary lesbian who I absolutely smile every time I see them. Ticha, spell the T and tell us who you are.
Thanks, Kero. And thanks to those at home taking the time to watch our show. I'm thrilled to be part of this exciting show and to have such amazing guests. You may find it shocking when I tell you that I am a construction electrician. I am a member of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers and have the honor of being on the board of the National Electrical Workers Minority Caucus. I'm proud to work with these amazing people that live across North America. They've been my mentors and my friends, and we are a community that continues to learn and grow together as we advance equity in our workplaces and our communities. These days, however, I'm pleased to be working for a nonprofit organization teaching welfare recipients, newcomers, unemployed, and underemployed folks. There, I instruct them in improving their math skills, construction safety courses, as well as some hands-on tool usage and how to build things. With these skills, I hope to assist them to join an apprenticeship for a well-paid unionized construction trade job. I also studied music at Concordia University, and I use this education to do one of my favorite things, sing karaoke with my good friends in their basement.
That is amazing. Ticha, you are awesome. I'm so happy that you're here with us. Next, we have one heck of an amazing human being. I have never met anyone so loving and caring and giving to the HIV community as this human. Alphonso King Jr., aka Jade Electra, aka TJ Relentless, aka How are you doing, my queen?
I am doing great. For those of you who are wondering about all those AKAs, it's the Witness Protection Plan. I am originally from the States, but now I am a resident here in Canada. My husband and I do a lot of work to promote the AIDS organizations in the city. We ran an event until COVID happened, called Mingo, which was a fundraiser for AIDS organizations and also a social for HIV positive people. I'm probably one of the few out and proud HIV positive drag performers under Jade Electra. Recording artist, oh my God, I can't think of everything, but I'm sure it'll come up at some point. So thank you. And it is an honor to be a part of the group. I'm looking forward to diving into all of the topics and seeing how we can hopefully affect change.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Alphonso. We are so happy that you are here with us. And I've had the chance to see Alphonso in all his different faces and hats that he wears. Just incredible. Now, the next person that I would love to introduce is none other than Antoine Elhashem. Not only is he a co-host here on the show, but also my co-producer and friend. How are you doing, Antoine?
And I'm your co-director too. You forgot that.
Oh yeah, co-director. Sorry. Jesus.
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you. I am very honored to be with this panel. Thank you guys for joining us. I can't think of any of going on this journey without all those amazing people on the screen.
Antoine, you have been doing so much for the LGBTQ2+ community. Tell us more about yourself and the work that you do. Maybe I'll finally get you a date.
I'll try to. Okay. Very quickly, I've been passionate about community for 32 years, so everything that I do actually follows that line. I publish the Pink Pages directory, PinkPlayMags, and theBUZZ magazine. I'm the host of the talk show On the Couch. It's been on Rogers TV for 6 seasons now. And in my spare time, one of the most passionate things that I do, and some of you have been there or been involved, is the Inspire Awards, a community initiative and organization that celebrates achievements and greatness in our community, and there's so much of that out there. So that's kind of in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Antoine. And he also loves long walks on the beach.
Not trying to get me a date. Go away.
Now that the introductions of our co-hosts are done, those watching from home, you better be ready for today's topic and our amazing guests. So stay tuned.
I'm making sanitizer sensual.
I can have sex with my own husband.
What? I'm doing a nightly review for the Gardner Construction Boys.
I am flattening that curve, honey. Ugh, tighter. Oh, tighter. Ugh.
Hello?
Namaste. Raju.
Hey, yeah, just getting ready for our date.
Me too. Are you excited for tonight?
Yeah. Do you know what undetectable means?
Yeah. It means you're positive, and there's no way I can get HIV when we have sex. Times have changed, eh?
Yeah, times have changed. I'm positive and undetectable.
Thanks for letting me know.
Welcome back. Now today we're gonna talk about a topic that has been going on for a long time, and it's really time to talk more about it. racism and policing. Not a new topic, but it's still ongoing. Now, to help answer some of the questions, we have two amazing guests on the show. First, we have Councillor Kristyn Wong-Tam. She is the councillor for Ward 13, the Toronto Centre, and part of the LGBTQ2+ community. Councillor Wong-Tam is a vocal champion for sustainable living and environmental health, and plays a vital role in ensuring the vibrancy of our city and its economic and social development. She is a tireless community activist, and Councillor Wong-Tam has been a strong advocate for the expansion of green public spaces, farmers markets, community gardens, including improvements to parks and ravines. That's not all though. She has also developed innovative partnerships with developers to build new affordable housing and has led efforts to defend the rights of tenants to obtain affordable and decent standards of rental housing. And Councillor Wong-Tam is also working in partnership with the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business to create the world's largest Indigenous Centre for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at 200 Dundas Street East. It's about time. It's nice seeing you again, Councillor. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and thank you very much for that extraordinary introduction. I was getting a little bit red just hearing you say all those things. Very nice to be here with all of you. I'm looking forward to this discussion as well. It's very timely, as Kero has already noted, but it's also one that has been raging on in the city for 30 years, and I think we're reaching a pinnacle point where we're bringing a lot more people into this discussion around policing who hasn't always been there. So we've got some new allies, the conversation is shifting, and that the groundswell for support is definitely getting bigger.
Thank you so much, Councillor, for this. Next guest we have is the ruthless and apologetic Ruth Cameron. She is the Executive Director of the AIDS Committee of Cambridge, Kitchener, the African, Caribbean, and Black Network of Waterloo Region, Advisory Committee, and doctoral student at Wilfrid Laurier University. Ruth is a queer Black woman, and her work, research, and advocacy focuses on HIV/AIDS prevention, LGBTQ health, and initiative combating anti-Black racism. She has led one of the most successful Black Lives Matter in Kitchener, and it was not gone unnoticed. She's an advocate for the people of color LGBTQ2 youth, a feminist for Black women, a speaker and educator for trans folks, a voice for many marginalized communities. Ruth, we are so happy to have you on the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm really excited to participate in this discussion. In addition to that, there's just a ton of fabulosity on my screen, and I just can't wait to hear how we all work together.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ruth. Now, guests, are you ready for our questions? Don't worry, we're not here to stab you or anything like that. This is really about having a conversation, and we're so happy to have you both with us today. And now, this is the meaty part of the conversation, or for the vegans out there, the tofu part of the conversation. I don't know. But the time has come for some of our questions, and we really need to get into it. And first we have Alphonso. Alphonso, go for it.
Okay, it is a pleasure to meet you, Ruth. My first question is for you. The Black Lives Matter movement has been going strong for the past couple of months. What do you think that we need to do to keep that momentum going? Because I mean, if there's going to be real change, we have to keep working at it. So what do you think we need to do?
Okay, well, you're right. I think that there's been an upswing in the movement right now, and gaining momentum, keeping momentum is really hard, no matter what kind of social movement you're a part of. I think that what I think of first off is this movement has been going since 2013, and it's important to look at the small wins as well as the big wins in this movement. It's not that this movement is doing something that is so drastically new. It's about Black civil rights. It's about Black liberation. What it is different, I think, is that this movement is unapologetically Black in a different way. What this movement has done is it was created by queer Black women, and it centered more marginalized Black lives from the outset. So talked about police violence as something that doesn't just happen to men, but that's something that happens to queers, and it's something that happens to trans folks in particular, you know, in a very specific and lethal way, and made people listen to that, and said that people were not going to hide their queer identities to be a part of this social movement. It talks about poverty, and I think that the reason that it will keep momentum is that there are so many people who can see themselves in this movement. People who are used to being shoved to the margins, people who have to fight every day, but now get to do so with some stage and some platform. So if you're used to fighting, but you don't often get, you know, you don't often get your spotlight, in this movement, you can find it. And I think, you know, issues for people who, you know, are more marginalized are at the center. So I think that that's a key to keeping the momentum going. Also, use of social media. Now, I myself, I'm a Twitter girl. Some of the younger folks I work with, they're on the gram. I use it very occasionally. The way that this movement has used social media platforms to get all kinds of people engaged and understanding what the issues are, people who don't see these as their issues, but see a way that they can amplify it, again, powerful thing. So I think, you know, smart young people keep the momentum going and use tools in different ways than those of us who might be, yes, less young.
Thank you. I think I would add to that. I think part of the other thing that's helping, which sounds weird, is COVID-19. Since people are at home more, they are actually witnessing what's going on, so they can get involved
very good, yeah,
a lot quicker.
good observation. Yeah.
So my second question, obviously, is for you, Kristyn. But I have to apologize to everyone. I'm going to go off topic for just a second. I hope that that's not a problem.
It's okay.
But it's something that I actually would like to ask you. Okay, so I'm a Toronto resident, and I kind of want to ask you something about your job. There are some in our community who actually are concerned about Church Street and what's happening in the village. I know that COVID-19 has put some businesses in jeopardy of closing. My question is, what measures are you taking to help save our village? And also putting in consideration the relationship with our community, the LGBTQ2+ community, with the police over these past few years. So could you address that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. And I just want to thank you for the question, Alphonso. With respect to the challenges of the village, as a former business operator on Church Street, I used to own Timothy's World Coffee, located at 500 Church Street. I kind of know the struggles of a business operator as well as the struggles of being someone who has to just sort of live in the political realm, but also having, you know, 2 feet on the ground, always in the community, because I'm a member of this community. The challenges facing Church Street have actually been there for some time, and I don't think it's necessarily new. The things that are now new is, of course, the COVID recession and lockdown. That is now facing every single neighborhood across the city. And if we take a look at what's happening around the world, many of the gay villages, not just in Toronto, but around the world, are all trying to reinvent themselves to be that space where people can come and congregate and call it a safe space for everyone, hopefully, and a space where people can flourish and be themselves. The challenge with that has oftentimes been the tensions between daytime business and nighttime business on Church Street, which generally has 2 vibes, if you ask me. And as a coffee shop owner at that time, I could see both. I could see the daytime business, the afternoon business, and the nighttime business. And every single business owner generally has found some difficulty in trying to pay the very high property taxes, which are really high in Toronto, especially for commercial businesses, as well as high rents. And then the cost of just doing business downtown. Things that I have done to support the village, knowing what I know, especially being one of the few people who've actually owned a business on Church Street, struggled to make my own rent, my own commercial rent, is a couple-fold. One is I fought and tried to reform MPACs. This is the boring technical stuff, but MPAC is the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, where you try not to pursue the highest and greatest valuation. So you can actually try to level the taxes based on what the operation of the business is worth, as opposed to pursuing it as a development site. That's a significant shift, that actually brings taxes down for all main streets, and that applied for Yonge Street, it applies for Church Street and everything else. So that's one piece. The other more recent work is actually trying to create a financial incentive to keep the businesses afloat through an economic development lens. The hard part has always been, how do you get government to incentivize and to provide benefits to private enterprises so they can stay afloat. And this is a new exploratory body of work. We studied this sort of same challenge that's facing most queer villages around the world, and we found that there's not a single legislative piece that works anywhere. We looked at San Francisco, we looked at Chicago, looked over in the UK, looked at what was happening in Europe. All the gay villages were kind of going through the same thing. Young people have different choices that perhaps I didn't necessarily have back in the day, and they have chosen to go elsewhere. But I've always felt that these queer centers are critically important, and that body of work is actually going to come back to council. And if we are successful, and this is the exciting thing, if we are successful, we're probably going to create the very first official policy tool to support LGBT businesses as cultural spaces, which is oftentimes referred for museums and galleries and concert halls. So sorry for the long answer, but once you dive into policy, it's not a simple reply. That's the first part of your question. Maybe I'll get to the policing question now.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the policing question is one for the community, I think, largely complicated. Depending on who you are in the LGBT community under the rainbow, you may have a different experience with police, and that's just the reality. Our trans brothers and sisters have a very different relationship with police, as do Black and Indigenous and people of color, non-status, those who engage in sex work, those who are consumers of drugs. Very different relationship than a cis white gay man. That is kind of the reality. But it hasn't always been comfortable for everyone, and it will not be comfortable for everyone for probably a long time, just because the inherent nature of policing is very much, it's heteronormative, it's extremely militarized, it's got a hyper-masculine approach, and they're here to enforce the law. There's very little gray line about that. And when we think about the relationship with the community, it's been complex, from the bathhouse raids to criminalization of gay sex, and state surveillance around our lives. It continues to be complicated, and I don't think we've actually had a deep dive necessarily in unpacking what it takes for our communities to be safe. And that's what the conversation around defunding the police and refunding that money to underfunded organizations have been about, is asking everybody, all of us, to imagine for ourselves, what does public safety look like? And then how do we as community leaders and as community members participate in that dialogue? So therefore we can create community-led policing alternatives that will truly keep everybody safe. And I will stop talking because that was a lot of words, and I apologize for that.
I want to interject before we go to the next questions. Councillor, you addressed the relationship with the police, but what about the safety in the village? Do you think that's affecting that the village is struggling because it just doesn't feel as safe, which is I hear sometimes?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm only, you can't see me in person because I'm on the screen, but I'm 121 pounds and I'm 5 foot nothing. So most people are bigger than me and taller than me. And you know, it doesn't take a lot for me to feel, what do you call it? Like just overwhelmed by someone who's just got size and height. So I know that that's on days where you have people who just may perhaps be more intimidating. But the reality is some of the challenges in the community, and this is important for us to talk about, because we have community members that are not doing well. They're homeless, right? They're street involved. They're also drug users, right? They're engaged in at-risk behavior, and they don't always feel safe in shelters, and they don't always feel safe in other types of housing spaces because of who they are, sexual orientation, sexual identity, and gender non-binary, all of that. And so they will come down to the village and they'll want to seek service because they know that it's supposed to be a safe space. But along with that comes with some other challenges. Business owners and residents who are not equipped and not trained and not equipped to be social workers. So we're asking a lot of the community when we don't always have the tools exactly in place when people need it, which is why we need to look at structural reform. In order for us to give everyone a place where they feel like they can belong and they feel safe, I think it's important for us to make sure that people have what they need. And what we need to start with is a place of home and a family, whether it's chosen or provided, that will be able to take care of them. And then we have to be able to address the issues that do plague the community around safety. And oftentimes those issues are, from what I can tell, is the fact that they don't always understand what's happening around them. And so I know that we've talked about safety without talking about what's creating the sense of unsafe. Yeah. And we can probably talk about that as well, because the police will come back to us and say, you need us. And they'll say, you have to, give us more money in order for us to have dedicated officers just for your neighborhood. And that tension will constantly be there for our community until we go really deep and talk about what that means for everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you for giving a very in-depth answer to my question. I have others, but we need to let other people ask questions.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, thank you so much for both Ruth and Councillor for your answers. I mean, there's so much. That's already just the beginning of the show, and we're already going so deep in. So brace yourselves for more to come. And it's so important that we, again, having those conversations are so important. And this is, I think, where the struggle is, where the conversations aren't really happening. There's a lot of pointing fingers and anger, and a lot of people are hiding behind the screen. Yeah. This is how I'm feeling. And that's been a very big challenge to overcome, especially with COVID-19, where people hiding behind the screen, and then some people who are learning how to have an impact with social media while they're behind the screen as well. Ruth, you look like there's something that you want to add to what was just said.
Yeah, I'm thinking about what was said about safety in the village, and I often think about safe for who. So I think that some people feel safe in the village and some don't, and it has a lot to do with how stigmatized their identities are. I also think that our communities have really rich legacies of care for one another. And what makes it really hard for people to care for one another now is not just this current recession, but all the economic policy that's happened over the last 30 years that really makes it tough for us to care for one another. At one time, you could be an artist in our community or someone else who was in a similarly lower paid service job and still afford to live in the village. When we had rent control, people could live there. People had houses in Toronto that were their queer chosen family. That were safe places for people to crash. If young kids ended up in Toronto, they might find unsafety, but they might also find safety in community, in a house with elders, because if people could afford to be in the village looking out for each other. Some people found safety in bathhouses. Some people lived in them. So I just think that it's economically untenable now to create those communities of care that we used to in the neighborhood that was considered ours for so many people. Now, I'm not going to say that all parts of our community claim the village in the same way, because it was often, I think, a very white space. But for racialized and Black members of the queer community, they could still afford to create other places of community out of houses, out of apartment blocks in the city at a time when we could all afford to be there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Ruth. Thank you for adding this. It's so important. And you're absolutely right about this. And I think it's a point of view that a lot of us haven't really thought about either, where they're feeling safe, where a lot of marginalized groups are also feeling safe. And so thank you for that. This is awesome. I'm so excited about this. And that brings me to the next person who's going to ask our questions, and that's Viviana. Viviana, what say you?
Hey, Hero, this is conversation that you want to keep for hours, right? And these topics are really important for our community to talk about. I'm gonna use what Ruth just said about safety for whom, because this is a topic that I want to. I have two questions, and I will really appreciate if you really focus on answering the questions, because it's a topic that, as a trans person, is always looking for an answer, and we never had the space or the chance to ask questions and then had an answer. So I will be really happy if I actually got to hear an answer from both of you, because each answer will create a balance in our community, especially this topic I'm going to talk about, which is the policing on the trans community. So again, my first question is going to be for both of you. And the question is, trans women of colors are often victims of violence, discrimination, harassment, and sexual assault. In most of these cases, they're being murdered, they're being killed. Why are we seeing higher numbers when it comes to trans people of color facing these challenges? And why is police not responding quickly to these murders, to these cases and incidents as they should be? The question, I guess here, the big question will be, do we not matter enough to be protected?
Who wants to go first? Thanks, Viviana, for this question. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. I think that it's an important question that you asked, Viviana. I think that it is, first of all, let me say thank you for asking this tough question. The brutal violence experienced by trans women, not just in North America, but around the world, I think that whenever I think about this, and I hope I don't sound too academic, it's directly linked to colonialism. I don't think that an institution like the police, that was not created for us, can ever protect the most marginalized members of our community, and that includes trans women of color. The police were created to control us. Police in North America came out of slave patrols and came out of the paramilitary force in Canada that was designed to control and clear Indigenous people off the land. The police are for protecting property. And we are seen as racialized people, that we should be in certain neighborhoods and that we don't have a right to exist in whatever geographical space that we want to. And I think that if you are seen to be out of place, then you are seen as a threat to property, as if our lives as racialized people aren't worth more than property. Then, if we talk about femininity, we've got to talk about being portrayed as a threat to white femininity and white heteronormative femininity. And if you unapologetically claim your femininity as a trans woman, you're going to be punished for it. And I don't know how to say that softly or diplomatically. and I just know how to say the truth, and that I think that the solutions around safety need to come from community. It's about people thinking about their idea about what it means to be queer, challenging that, and unapologetically taking up space and creating space for other people to take up space when it comes to their gender, however they see that, and how they queer that, and how they understand that, and understand that no one else and their understanding and deep knowledge of themselves is a threat, right? And affirming everybody else's gender and wholeness as a person. We can't claim to be allies if we're not actively trying to create safety for whoever's most marginalized in our communities. And I don't see it as realistic to expect the cops to create that for us.
Wow, thanks Ruth for that. Councillor.
Yeah, no, I would have to echo a lot of what Ruth has just said. I touched upon it earlier about the hyper-masculinity of the police culture. It is militarized, it's designed to intimidate. Even the way we build our officers is with tactical gear. When they walk into a room, it can be quite overwhelming. And when some people look at the police, they see safety. And then there's other members of our community that don't feel safe. And they want to walk away because they just don't trust what will happen next. And there has been enough, sadly enough evidence and demonstrated cases that there are members of our community that call the police when they need them the most. The police, when they do show up, sometimes re-victimizes the person who has just been perhaps assaulted or harmed in one way or the other. And that has a lot to do with the culture of policing, not even just as the institution of what it's designed to do, which is largely correct, we've named it, is to protect property. But these are also colonial instruments that have not really reformed. And in order for us to work through that, and these are really tough questions, and I, there's very few things that keep me up at night. I'm a 14-month baby, and he does keep me up at times. But it's oftentimes when I think about violence and who gets hurt and who's not, and who's getting support and who's not getting supported. The people that are not getting supported, especially in the LGBTQ2S+ community, are oftentimes racialized, BIPOC, trans people, non-binary. And as a masculine presenting woman myself, I sometimes feel that, but not to the extent, not even close to the extent of what I know my trans friends do, when, especially if they are Black and Indigenous, what they feel when they think about safety for them and where they can and cannot go, both in mainstream spaces, but also in places of work, places of worship, schools, and what have you. To deal with the police and how to ensure that structure works for our community, this will require, two schools of thoughts, right? One is you can reform it. The other one is to abolish, dismantle, and then to rebuild it. And not necessarily with the same bones, right? It's got to look entirely different in order for us to really have a sense of safety, how we co-create it together, or even how we define safety. And that will require some deep structural work. And right now, the way it's set up, it will not work unless we can do that deep structural reform or we dismantle it. And this is a tough one for our community because we'll probably never get to a place of consensus. And this is probably why the Black Lives Matter conversation has been more important than before, largely because we are seeing trans, non-binary, queer people at the helm of that movement, not just in Toronto, which definitely that's the way it's defined here, but also in the US and perhaps even further abroad. And if we can ensure that those voices that are already leading us out of the darkness and out of the shadows can keep their place in leadership as we push forward together for that big structural reform or dismantle or abolish conversation, then I know we're going to get to a better outcome. And that will require some really deep work and some hard conversations. And we may not necessarily need to build, and I don't think we're going to get there, consensus. We just need to know, how do we protect the most vulnerable, the most at-risk members of our community? And we do everything we can to defend and protect them, the most cherished and most valuable members of our community. And then those who have privilege, who have access to power, they'll be taken care of. But it's the most vulnerable that need extra support, and that's where we need to place our energies.
Something I think about when it comes to care is how we literally look out for one another. You know, I'm not going out to the bar much nowadays, especially when during COVID, but I know that when I was younger and coming out, you know, we talked to each other about leaving, not leaving alone, you know, and how each person was getting home, right? How are you going to get home safely? You taking the bus? Who you're riding with? Are you walking? Who you're walking with? You know, do we think about those things anymore as part of our norm? You know, making sure that we each get safely home, because we don't expect that we can rely on the cops if something goes south. Maybe a little overly simplistic, but just something that comes to mind for me.
It's not simplistic. I mean, it's basic foundation, I think, and it's so important to remember that. Thank you so much for that, to the both of you once again. And I'm a bit mind blown right now with these answers. It's a lot to process, that's for sure. And we really got to take a look at these things closely. We've got to have these conversations. And thank you, Viviana, for asking these super important questions. I know Viviana had another question, but we're actually running out of time. So I'm going to go to our next host to ask the question as well. Now, before I do that, I know Antoine, you have one question that's on your mind, and I think it's a very important question, and it's an amazing segue into Ticha's question as well. Antoine, go for it.
You're on mute, Antoine.
My apologies. Councillor, I think you might get this question answered better. What does defunding the police mean? Because people get angry when they see that in news media. And I know it doesn't mean defunding the police the way they think that means.
I would actually love to hear both Councillor and Ruth's perception of defunding for sure, because I know working in an AIDS reverse organization myself, our definition and understanding of defunding affects us as well. So I'm sure Ruth will have something to say about that too. So take it away, Councillor and Ruth.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I'm looking forward to hearing the even everybody's definition of what defund the police means. So for me, I really had to lean into this question even further. Because the first reaction I had was a bit guttural, I have to admit, was, are we talking about abolishing and dismantling the police? Because that's what it led to in my mind. But what I realize now is that defunding the police question is really one for all of us. And I mentioned it earlier, is for all of us, every single one of us, to reimagine what public safety means for me and for the communities that I belong to, or the city that I belong to. So therefore, we should all participate in the conversation of how do we take money away from what I believe is an overfunded service, the police service or the police force, and then we reallocate those funds in underfunded community-based organizations that can lead us to policing alternatives. I'm going to give you that as a simple reply. And I know that there are different conversations that are being held and had in coffee shops, virtually, in meeting rooms, at kitchen tables, that defund the police for some people also means to abolish the police or to dismantle the police. And the police will want you to think that's the only path when it comes to defund the police. because they oftentimes want to set up a narrative that if we don't fund them adequately, then we're going to be left in sort of crime-ridden mayhem, and that people will feel further unsafe. But I think we've learned in the past that policing is not going to be very effective at keeping certain community members safe, including those who are probably living with mental illness, those who are living without housing. We're asking the police to attend all sorts of calls that they are not equipped to deal with, because the tools that they have in their tool belt are rather limited. And those limited tools are, I'm going to write you a ticket and cite you, or I'm going to arrest you. For someone who's actually living with particular harms and that need mental health support, or need access to harm reduction services, or need access to safe supply, like whatever that looks like, a policing call is not going to get us to the solution that is going to be what we ultimately need. And so we've been overfunding one service to the detriment of underfunding other community services.
Yeah, and you're right. We've been defunding all of those other services for over 30 years now, and quite literally handing the money over to the police. So we have to talk about not only funding services, because services aren't the end all and the be all. Yes, we do need community services. Yes, we do need healthcare services. Yes, we do need social services, all of those things. And they do need to be well resourced enough to provide us with really quality care and make sure that they can do an effective job of being truly inclusive of all of our communities, which they aren't. But in addition to that, we have to put money quite literally back in communities. Policing is a pretty new invention, and we managed to live without police for thousands of years, and I think that we can live without police again. They're not the end all and the be all. We had other ways of taking care of one another. So I think that when we're talking about defunding, many people see defunding as a stage on the way to abolition, whereas others see defunding as you mentioned harm reduction, another kind of harm reduction. The police are too big, they're militarized. I'm not sure why you need tanks to patrol subdivisions, but defunding the police means reducing the size, the scope, and the impact that they can have, especially on our most marginalized communities. So hopefully they will create less harm in those communities. But it's true, some people see the defunding as an incremental change where we will further defund over time and move to other ways of providing safety in our communities. And it's something that I think we need to discuss. I talked a little bit about, some informal ways we used to care for each other, and hopefully still do. But there are community organizations, both formal and informal ones, that do a lot of safety work. So there are such as the Bear Clan Patrol, which wanders around communities with hot coffee, sandwiches, blankets, and asks people who are in distress or who are involved in, fights that aren't seen as, dangerous to intervene in, what do you need? Talks to people and gives them, some basics, maybe gives somebody a coat on the street, or talks to people and finds out whether they want to go and attend community service that is geared towards those populations you mentioned, Kristyn. So, we can fund communities to do this kind of care work so that police don't respond to mental health calls, police don't respond to behavior we consider alarming that's actually not dangerous happening on the street.
Thank you both for this. And Ticha, that leads us to your question very well. I know some of it might have been answered a bit, but Ticha, the floor is yours.
Great, amazing answers. I just want to comment a little bit about Ruth, what you were saying about, and Kristyn, about the last 30 years, that this has escalated, I think, because of all the cuts in funding that the conservative governments have done over the last 30 years. And I think that leads to a lot more violence in policing, things like that, because when you underfund communities, you end up having, you know, people who are in need and want, and also the privatization threats of prisons, and that chained to, you know, another form of slavery in the police, in the prisons and stuff like that. So I'm gonna kind of, because I know we're short on time, I'll try to make my two questions into one, because we did answer a lot of it. So maybe just speak to the stuff you haven't said yet. But so when you were talking about defunding the police, and how do we reshape what's left? So if we don't abolish, and in other words, the police are left with a percentage, whatever percentage that is of the budget, what do we ask from them to make them more accountable, to transform how they police and how they can better deal with confrontation in such a way that does not escalate to violence? And also in making significant changes to reallocate those funds to better serve our community, where do you see, you've mentioned this a little bit already, but where do you see these funds going to better serve our communities? I think the question is more about like how to make them accountable though, because I don't know if you've spoken to that now. Like how can we actually say if they're left with 50% of the budget that they've had before, now how do we make them accountable to that? Ruth, you can answer first, and then.
Okay. I've got lots of ideas about this one. I think about it all the time as someone who runs a nonprofit organization. So I think that we want to reinvest directly in communities, and we also want to reinvest in community, social, and healthcare services. I think that assuming only investing in kind of publicly funded services is a bit of a problem, because policing doesn't just happen through police. Policing happens in our mental health system. Policing can happen in other aspects of our healthcare system, and policing can happen through social work really effectively as well. So we have to think about how to reform all of those kinds of services as well when we're talking about getting rid of police. It's about getting rid of the police in your head as well, right? So we say that some kinds of families, right, aren't legit, or we say that a person who doesn't want to use a really Western form of like a mental health intervention isn't compliant and therefore needs to be forced to do something. And if we actually not only fund you know, traditional kinds of services, our hospitals, our community health centers, you know, the social service agencies that exist in our neighborhoods, but we also quite literally put money back into communities so that people can, you know, form care collectives, you know, afford to live collectively if they want to do that, or just afford to live in proper housing. I think that will do a lot around solving many of these issues. So yes, it is complex, and it's also sometimes really simple. I think that people have incredible capacity to look out for one another when they're not desperate. So I think that it involves, you know, putting more money into big formal structures like community health centers and like hospitals as well. But it's also about if there's anywhere where I'm comfortable looking at the concept of reform versus abolish, it's about reforming some of these social service systems that are punitive as well, right? You didn't comply with your treatment, therefore you're a bad patient and we're going to kick you out, rather than form you, you know, let you have autonomy and decide what you need. Or, you know, we're going to, you know, monitor your house and you know, and visit it. There's nothing that's truly dangerous happening there. What's this monitoring about? So I think that I'll leave it there, that we're going to fund those formal kinds of things, but we're also going to literally make sure that people have livable wages, and that we have some kind of controls when it comes to rents and our housing market when it comes to mortgages, so that working class people can afford a mortgage again, or that, you know, a single adult can afford to live in a one-bedroom apartment if they want to. I think that these are big parts of getting back to places where people don't have such a struggle to even care for themselves, and therefore don't feel overextended when it comes to caring for other people.
Thank you for that, Ruth. It's funny that you mentioned that because I'm seeing it happen here slowly in Durham, where people are starting to not be able to afford a mortgage or housing or rent, and it's scaring people away. And I'm noticing people are moving further east and north and so on, where they're trying to just live. So thank you for that, Ruth. Councillor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are great answers, Ruth. Thank you for sharing with us. I'm an immigrant child. My family and I came to Canada in the 70s, and I grew up in social housing, and Regent Park, for those in Toronto will know, it's Canada's largest housing sort of complex, 69 acres. And I would say for someone who has oftentimes relied on the state, whether it's public education, access to public libraries, public recreation services, you name it, if the government offered it, my family took advantage of it. And they never owned a car because they couldn't afford one. And so we took the TTC, which is the Toronto Transit System. When we need to go anywhere, we took the TTC. If the TTC didn't go there, we couldn't go there. And it was kind of as simple as that. The way, you know, what we can do to create a safer, more inclusive, more equitable society has got to be one that involves government, but it can't be exclusive to government, because it also means that if it's too centralized, all that control and programming, things can go very wrong, and it becomes incredibly institutional. So I really like the model of decentralizing the issues that contribute to safety by ensuring that communities are involved. And this is where we need to really get very imaginative, I think, as people, because the housing crisis that we have in Toronto is no different than what you've just noted, Kero. It's in Durham, it's in Hamilton, it's in Ottawa. It is like literally across the country in every urban center. And the same thing with respect to main streets. Small businesses are struggling across the country, not just in Toronto. We are going to need to embark on this incredibly large, but also I am encouraged by a journey of what can the new normal look like after COVID. And there is a lot of conversation right now about governments not having enough money. It's just the way the economy has been going sour for a lot of folks. And the City of Toronto is going to be sitting with a $2 billion deficit before the end of this year. That is obviously unfunded because it's a deficit, but that's before we walk into the next year's budget, which will probably be equally of equal pressure. And so we have to make some tough decisions. And if not now, I don't know when will we make these investments. But it has to be one that's led by community heart and community vision. And I actually think that in order for us to get more voices and more people into that decision-making space, we have to decentralize some of that, where community members then can push back against global capitalism. They have to be able to push back and demand governments, and in this case, rent control is from the provincial government. We need to be able to push back on the Police Services Act about what constitutes, adequate policing. And again, that's sort of sitting at the province. We need to be able to do a lot of that work, but we have to be able to thread it all together so we understand what's at risk, what will we lose, and also what will we gain if we're able to bravely together take this big step. And people have said to me, Kristyn, it will never happen. You're never going to defund the police. Do you know how strong the association or the union is? Do you know how stacked the Police Service Board, which provides you civilian oversight, is? Do you know that even if you made a decision at City Council to defund the police by a minimum of 10%, the Toronto Police Association and the chief can just appeal your decision, City Council's decision, to the Ontario Civilian Police Commission, and they can give them the money, and you still have to pay them. So we have to ask for big structural changes. And this is where the conversation cannot just happen at City Hall. It's got to happen at every order of government. And I cannot think of government not responding to what is now a global movement. I received over 30,000 emails from residents on this issue. It's significant, and in case you don't know, usually we don't receive 30,000 emails on any one issue. This issue captured people's attention, and they want change. We have to sustain the movement, give them lots of oxygen, and make sure that people who have a lot to say, who has not been heard, is given the opportunity to be heard, and we've got to make space for them. And that's how we're going to get to the police reforms, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Kero, if you don't mind, I'm going to grab from here because I know we're running out of time. I'm just going to close this segment. I'm going to close with a bit of story and finish with a question to everybody. A couple of weeks ago, my neighbor, my dog was barking, and my neighbor called the police. I hear a knock on the door. I go down to look, and it's the police, and it's 2 cars, full gear, everything. I opened the doors, like, what's wrong? Your dog is barking, and we thought something is wrong. It might be wrong. And my first thought is, are you seriously showing up at my door with 2 cars and your full gear because somebody called about a dog barking? So right there, you have way too much money if that's how you deal with an issue as simple as that. But at the same time, I thought, right away, my mind went into, I'm Arab, but I don't look as dark as Kero. But what if that call was made, I mean, it was intimidating. And what was that call was made on somebody who's black or person of color or a trans person? How more intimidating, because we know all the stories, we know the relationship. So that right there, you showed up in a very intimidating way. That should be reserved to something a lot more serious. It looked like you're on war with me when it's about a dog. Is the system racist?
You bet it is.
Thank you. I don't need to add more.
I say this not only as a black woman, a black queer woman, but I say this as a woman who has dealt with intimate partner violence in my life, and known that I can't get support around my safety from the police. We know that for members of our community, when people are feeling unsafe, that their fear, the fact that they're feeling intimidated, may be treated like a joke if they call the police. People might be seen as the ones who are perpetrating the violence if they call the police, and therefore actually experience more harm.
Yeah, that's really what I felt. Councillor, would you close this section for us with your thoughts on this?
I feel like Ruth has just said it. Like, to be quite honest, the system is racist. It wasn't designed for really any of us as racialized people who are all on the screen tonight. And carving out that space so that we can exist in a world free from violence, free from discrimination, has been a lifelong struggle for myself and my family. So yes, it is inherently racist, and it's because it's been built on colonial structures and slavery and capitalism that's benefited on the exploitation of labor, dark-skinned people labor. So this is where I am going to say that there has been probably some moments in time where I feel encouraged. And the reason I feel encouraged right now is that people are energized for this particular process and progress. And we may all be coming at it from different places, social locations, but I think the one thing we can all largely agree on is that the status quo has left too many people behind, and there are too many people that have passed, and there's too many people that we don't want to continue to leave further behind. COVID has revealed that. It's actually made everybody, I think in some ways it's radicalized some people and awoken some others. And for that, I'm incredibly grateful to you and to everybody else who shared their thoughts on the panel today. Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you. There's just so much to process with what was said today. And this is only the tip of the iceberg. So for our viewers watching this, like, this is how you have a conversation. And it's so important to have these conversations, because just shouting over each other, we won't be able to find a solution with each other. So that being said, let's just take a moment to have a break. Breathe in, breathe out, and just really process what was just said. I think it's so important. So let's just take a moment here and take a break, and then we'll get back to each other.
I'm scheduling my post-quarantine hookup itinerary.
I'm exploring every nook and cranny of self-love.
I'm engaging with online fetish communities I never even knew existed.
I am flattening that curve, honey. Ugh, tighter. Oh, tighter. Ugh.
Tyler!
I just found out I've got HIV. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm scared.
Hey, I know you're scared. I've been living with HIV for 25 years, and with treatment today, I'm living a long, healthy life. You can too.
Maybe I will be okay.
Welcome back to our viewers who've been watching the premiere of the Queer Bunch. I still can't believe that this has just happened. The premiere of the Queer Bunch, and such an amazing topic and conversation. And we heard from two incredible human beings that are really in the front line of that work with policing and racism. And so thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts here at the Queer Bunch for being part not only of the premiere, but being part of the solution and being part of the conversation. So thank you so much for that. And this is something that's, I've learned a lot today, and I'm sure we all have. One of the things that I've learned is empathy. There seems to be a lack of empathy within the police department because of the hyper-masculinity. Now, the second point is, do we want to abolish the police and dismantle it completely and restart it from scratch? Viewers, what do you think? Or do we just defund part of them and then ask and spread the funds around where the services are more needed? Hint, hint. I think it's so, that's the second thing I'm thinking as well. I actually took some notes, and I'm gonna have to go back to the recording later to bring that information out into the community. But I think one of the important notes here is trans folks are still at the bottom of the radar with all of this. Viviana, I know you had more questions, and we're going to dedicate a whole episode just on trans folks and trans rights and trans people of color, because this is such a bigger topic. So stay tuned for that when that's going to happen as well. And Black women, yes. You know, as an Egyptian, I come from North Africa, and I've had the chance to work in Eastern Africa and see the women and the empowerment and resiliency of women in Africa. And that's actually what helped me accept my own HIV status and my non-binary status as well, and so on. So Black women leading the way around the world is not uncommon, but it's about time that we know about it and we hear about it. So those are just some very small points that I brought up today. And for those of you who want to watch this again, I mean, next month we're going to be talking about COVID-19 and the new normal. We will be having a mental health worker here with us who's going to navigate us from staying at home and creating a hangout bubbles and even hooking up when you meet someone online, what to do in this new normal as well. And the show will be available on our Facebook page, The Queer Bunch. Look it up and please like our page. And it's going to be available on the YouTube channel, on the Couch Facebook page, the Buzz, the PinkPlayMag, the AIDS Committee of Durham Region Facebook page as well. And
it's everywhere. It's easier.
It's everywhere. If you didn't catch any of this, the information will be available on our Facebook page as well as in the description of the video. And this is giving you all the ability to watch the show anytime from anywhere, on your couch, in your bed, or in the sling, It's all really up to you. But really, but really, from the
We
queer
don't
bunch, from the queer bunch here to you at home and to our guests, we sending you so much love. And remember, there is no place for racism anywhere in this world. There's room for conversation with each other and to build each other up and to build each other with resiliency and uplift one another. So thank you again to both our guests and to our amazing co-hosts. I'm so excited about the premiere once again. Thank you. And this is what I have for today.
Yay! Bye!
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.